Good afternoon and welcome to True Crime Mysteries. If you're new to the channel, hello and welcome, and if you're returning, welcome back. Today we are discussing 3 Canadian cold cases. Let's get into it. Number 1. Babes in the Woods. Vancouver, British Columbia's oldest cold case has recently had a new development, but the nearly 7-decade mystery hasn't been solved yet. It was on January 14, 1953, when skeletal remains were found in Stanley Park by a park employee. He had been going through a more remote part of the park when he stepped on something and crushed it. He examined further and found a woman's coat, and below the coat was a small skull. Investigators carefully excavated the area and found the remnants of 2 children's helmets, clothing, a picnic basket, and a hatchet, which was later determined to be the murder weapon. The remains were identified as belonging to 2 children, and they were given the moniker Babes in the Woods. It was estimated the bodies had been there since approximately 1947. The medical examiner that first worked the case concluded that one of the children was a female, which had hampered the investigation greatly. For decades, many theories had been constructed to attempt to explain why 2 young children had been murdered in Stanley Park. Although significant folklore has surrounded this case for years, we must not forget that these real children who died a tragic and heartbreaking death, said Inspector Dale Weedman in a statement to the media. All attempts to find the children's families had failed. Several different techniques were used to generate different visual reconstructions of what the children might have looked like, but it never helped the Vancouver Police Department in identifying them. In 1996, a scientist at UBC did DNA testing on some of the remains and determined that the remains were that of 2 boys, brothers in fact, and estimated the ages to be close to 6 and 10.
So after I received the position of Detective Sergeant in the Provincial Unsolved Homicide Unit, I wasn't carrying a caseload. I thought I would like to have a look at it, because the media had resurrected it so many times. And by the way, the media are the one that gave the name of the Babes in the Woods. It's from a Shakespeare's play, and that stuck with the file. So after resurrecting it, I discovered that the remains were on display in the Vancouver Police Museum. I did not think that was appropriate. So I went down one day without any authority from any of my superiors, and I seized all the remains. I took them out to my very good friend, Dr. David Sweet here at the Bureau of Legal Dentistry at UBC. And while I held the skulls, David was able to extract a tooth from each of the skulls. And then I'll pass it over to him in a minute to explain what he did. But after that, I took the remains to a crematorium that will remain strictly with me, because I'm not going to identify it to you. And I had the remains minus the skulls cremated. And then I arranged to have the remains taken with a police boat off of Kitsilano Point, and with the police chaplain at that time, dedicated the remains to the ocean. We had a nice little service, and the Children's Festival was on, but that was not planning on my part, it just was coincidence. Now after the remains were interred into the sea, Dr. Sweet and I kept it to ourselves what biological remains were kept for future advancement in DNA and scientific research. We kept that secret for a lot of years, and we didn't release that because we thought it sounded kind of ghoulish for people that wanted to know, and believe me, there were people that wanted to know, but we kept that to ourselves. So the fallacy of that they were running out of DNA is incorrect, because there were lots of teeth in those skulls, and Dr. Sweet, God bless him, was able to extract DNA by pulverizing one of the teeth, and I'll ask him to explain it.
Sergeant Honeyborn wanted to confirm that in fact the information that was in the file at the time he was looking at it was true, and we could use modern DNA evidence of the day, mid-1990s, to extract a usable DNA source and to confirm that it was in fact a boy and a girl. We have developed at my laboratory this technology for extracting DNA from teeth and from bones. An armor coating covers the material that's inside, so the technique was to grind the tooth and then expose the DNA to the surface from where it could be recovered. We analyzed that with the technology of the day, which improved in a couple of years. The results, initial results, were confirmed with additional testing, and it was determined that they were not a boy and a girl. In fact, they were two boys that were related as half-brothers. They shared a mother but not a father. And so that became an extremely important part of the investigation because it changed the thinking at the time and obviously changed the scope of the investigation where the police were looking for a young boy and girl.
This changed the direction of the investigation greatly, as investigators now had more accurate information. In 2021, the VPD sent off samples of DNA and reached out to the Redgrave Research Forensic Services, a genetic genealogy company, to help build familial profiles. Over the last year, the Redgrave team had worked tirelessly to build out those trees despite several challenges with the DNA, which after so long and had not been preserved well, had degraded significantly. Eventually, they identified ancestors they believed to be maternal grandparents. They reached out to family members who gave samples of their DNA and were able to confirm they had identified a tree of maternal relatives. After so many decades, the two little boys, previously only known as the Babes in the Woods, have been given their names back: Derek and David Dalton. The boys were 7 and 6 at the time of their deaths and had a surviving older sister. It is still unclear what happened. It seems to have been a closely guarded family secret, as surviving relatives have never known what had happened to the boys. Their mother passed in 1996 at the age of 78, and had always told relatives that the boys had been removed from her by Child Protection Services. The VPD didn't find any records matching either the mother's name or the boys. This may be where this case ends, as too much time has passed to get any more answers, but it can end with 2 children taken far too early, a chance to finally be laid to rest with their names and to be known as more than the Babes in the Woods. Number 2. Melissa Szabo. It was late on November 25, 2005 in Thompson, Manitoba, when Melissa Szabo was working a long shift as a cab driver. Melissa, those who knew her called her Lissa, was a 35-year-old single mother to a teenage son and was also a devoted foster parent, having housed over 20 children over the last 10 years. She loved fostering and supported her foster kids whenever they needed help, even if it had been years since they'd been in her care. Melissa drove cab part-time to supplement her income. Her full-time job was working as a care aide to adults with developmental disabilities. She had worked at North Star Cab for almost a decade, mostly picking up shifts from October to December to save up for Christmas, and on this Friday night was her normal graveyard shift. Around midnight, she was dispatched to a call to the Thompson Arena. The caller didn't leave a name or number with the dispatcher. Melissa called into the dispatcher to let them know that drop-off would be at the Ramada Hotel, now the Burntwood Hotel. RCMP have stated that they believe Melissa picked up 2 passengers at around 12:30 a.m. She drove into a parking lot behind the mall in Thompson, where she was attacked and killed by the people in her cab. Melissa had been stabbed several times while attempting to flee the vehicle. Her attackers fled on foot, captured on surveillance cameras going through a field east of the parking lot. Another cab driver had been sitting in his cab also in the mall parking lot and saw the taxi top light and went over to see what was going on. He attempted to help Melissa, but it was too late. The 2 suspects were never identified or found. The case had been cold for several years. It doesn't appear that Melissa had been robbed, and it is unclear what the motive was for the attack. Melissa was called the gentlest driver, and her manager said, if someone didn't have the money, she'd smile and say, "Pay later." She never would have gotten into a dispute with someone. After Melissa's murder, Thompson changed its bylaws to require all taxi cabs be fitted with cameras. There is a $14,000 reward for any information that leads to an arrest. Anyone with information are asked to contact Crime Stoppers. Number 3. Barbara Jean McLean. In the early morning hours of February 26, 1977, a man walking his dog along the gravel road in northern Calgary made a grisly discovery. The body of a young woman was discovered in a ditch. Her cause of death was strangulation, and she was later identified as Barbara Jean McLean. The 19-year-old had recently moved to Calgary from Nova Scotia and worked as a bank teller for Royal Bank. She shared her apartment with her boyfriend, and officers worked to trace back the events of the previous evening. Barbara Jean had a wide group of friends and was often seen at her favorite local bar. That was where she was the night before, at Highlander Bar with a group of friends. At some point in the evening, her boyfriend got kicked out of the bar for being too rowdy. He sat in the parking lot in his vehicle and waited for Barbara to come out. When the bar closed at 2:30 a.m., Barbara joined him in the car and they had a heated argument. Both of them were intoxicated, but her boyfriend drove off and left her alone in the parking lot. She had told a friend she was going to a house party and intended to hitchhike there. That was the last time Barbara was seen alive. The RCMP have stated that they believe Gary McAstocker is responsible for the crime. He was a registered sex offender that had been released on parole at the time and had been known to target women hitchhiking, but it was never definitively confirmed. McAstocker committed suicide before he could be questioned in connection to Barbara's murder. Barbara Jean's murder was also connected to several other women in the area that had been murdered in similar circumstances, alluding to the presence of a serial killer in the area. The case is still open, but there hasn't been any new developments in some time. Anyone with information is asked to call Crime Stoppers. Number 4. Marel Lenny. Marel Lenny was a 17-year-old student from Toledo, Northwest Territories. She had recently moved to Yellowknife, Yukon that September to finish high school and was staying with family. She was described as an outgoing and friendly person. And on October 6, 1991, she went missing from downtown Yellowknife. She was last seen around 6 p.m. near the Discovery Inn. She wasn't reported missing for 12 days, and little has been released about the case. Her body was found on May 8, 1992 in Great Slave Lake, 7 months after she had gone missing. Her body was identified with dental records. The RCMP have stated that there is enough evidence to suggest Mariella was murdered, but have declined to release any further information about the case, including cause of death. Her family have continued to advocate for Mariella and keep her cold case in the media. They are desperate to know the status of the investigation, and even after so many years, don't understand why the RCMP have declined to tell them more information about what had happened to their daughter. Mariella's murder was one of several in the Yukon in the 90s. Her case is among the hundreds of known murdered Indigenous women cold cases to have occurred between 1980 and 2012. Anyone with information is asked to contact the RCMP or Crime Stoppers. Well, that is it for this video. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you like the content and what I do over here, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss my next upload. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed the content, and also letting you know that we have Patreon as well as channel membership where you can get more behind the scenes content and exclusive content, or just to support the channel. In the description box of this video, you will also find links to all my socials to connect with me, as well as other things. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you all in the next one.